Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. I'm back after an all too long break. I know it was only about 5 days or so, but it feels like a month because of all of the news that I was not able to cover and analyze as I usually love to do. I was busy moving into a new apartment. The whole process was a little hectic, but I'm finally here. My workstation is set up, internet is working, and that's really all that matters, right? Anyways, the news I did miss was of course not only the Destiny 2 development roadmap, but also the preview of the Sandbox update coming in March that has been dubbed the Go Fast update. I have to say the details of these updates sound pretty cool and very promising, and I believe that with an epic expansion, Destiny 2 might just have the ability to course correct and maybe even start building up some legitimate hype again for whatever the major expansion will be. So in this video we're going to take a deeper look into that development update and try to piece together what it all might mean. Let's get into it. Alright, so the roadmap here is truly unlike anything we've seen for Destiny. We've never had a detailed roadmap that shows us specific line items that cover the next 3 updates. I'm loving all the transparency and communication. So far they are killing it in that department. Now, this may not look super detailed, but remember that most of these are items that they talked about in much greater detail during the Bungie development update a few weeks ago. And now we see them all in this snazzy new graphic. So let's take a look at some of the highlights. So update 1.1.2 was deployed last week, which launched with Iron Banner that gave us Masterwork armor and the complete rework of raid loot, including new raid specific mods. I did an entire rundown of these new features a few days ago, so I'll leave a link down below if you want to check that out. In short, Masterwork armor felt a bit underwhelming, but the entire update was an incredible first step. Now we have update 1.1.3 focusing on strikes and social features, and now we have an official date for that release, which is February 27th, and it includes some features we knew were coming, but also some interesting new stuff that I don't think they've even mentioned before. So we have the Nightfall scoring and score tracking. This is going to replace the Nightfall countdown timer and should inspire some friendly competition during Nightfalls. And then we have emblem and aura reworks. Very curious to see what this ends up being. We don't really know anything about this. Aura reworks I can see as a necessary thing to give players greater incentives to complete prestige activities. My hopes are for perhaps a stacking XP buff, maybe 10% for Nightfall, 10% for Leviathan, and finally another 10% from Trials. But the curious thing here is that it shares a line item with a rework to emblems, so maybe auras and emblems will be more closely tied together. I know we saw some more utility out of emblems during the screenshot we got previewing ranked play, so perhaps that's where we'll see it implemented. Moving on, we have PC public text chat, exotic repetition reduction, some updates and functionality to the mobile Destiny companion apps, and then finally we have a stretch goal item, and we'll see this pop up later as well. Text shown in yellow are things that they hope to accomplish, but could slip to a later release. I suppose it relies on getting the priority items done first, which honestly I would probably graduate this particular item to priority status as it includes Nightfall Strike unique rewards. So this sounds an awful lot like Strike specific loot, like the Grass of Malak and the Baron's Ambition from Destiny 1. It is interesting that they are isolated to the Nightfall though, and of course we'll have to wait and see how the acquisition of these will work exactly. Unfortunately, I think they have to make these items a little bit harder to get. They can't be as easy as they were in D1, because the only reason you grinded through strikes over and over was because the strike specific loot was paired with randomized perks. We don't have that in D2, so there's that to consider. Either way, I think this should become a priority because honestly we need more gear in the game. This is still a huge point of contention for me, and I'm sure a lot others as well. If you remove the random perks, you need like 4 to 5 times the number of weapons to make up for that lack of variety. And honestly, I don't even see us getting that in Gods of Mars. I'm hoping that we get a ton of new gear in the fall expansion, but of course that's a different conversation. But anyways, that wraps up the February update, which is looking very promising for the most part. Let's move on to March with update 1.1.4, the Sandbox and Crucible update. Let's skip number 1 for now, we'll circle back to it in a minute, but then we have the very welcome addition to heroic strike modifiers, should make strikes a lot more interesting to complete. Still don't have an overarching motivation to clear them though, Powerful engrams are just not very useful at the moment. Iron Banner 6v6, we knew 6v6 would be making a return to Destiny 2, and it looks like they'll be field testing it with the March or April Iron Banners. Weekly Crucible playlists including Mayhem are coming, so Mayhem will be returning every so often, which is nice. I would also like to see the occasional doubles or even the return of game modes like Inferno. That would be pretty cool. Next we have Crucible game mode tuning. We also caught a glimpse of that, and it involves things like increased frequency of power ammo, quicker player respawns, and the dropping of power ammo on player death for anyone to grab around you. Sounds like they want to quicken the pace of combat and make you feel more powerful, which is definitely very welcome. Next we have Nightfall Challenge cards. Sounds like the bounties of old. Perhaps completing the bounty would get you something pretty cool. We can hope. Next, Crucible Quitter penalties are being implemented. I can't recall if they outlined this already. My ideas were to make it so you can't earn rewards for a limited time. That could also just be not my idea and something I remember reading, so let me know in the comments. Also, finally, we have the repeat Crucible map and strike protection, which is really just using scotch tape to hold down a band-aid. Just rip it off and give us a voting system finally, please. Anyways, they have the stretch goal of making changes to exotic weapons and armor sandbox. My guess is that they simply hope to implement this with the March update, but it may slip into April. That would be fine. Anyways, let's touch on the first line item again, which is the sandbox changes coming in 1.1.4, which also feature what looked like a pretty massive change to the weapon and ability sandbox. Josh Hamrick, the senior sandbox designer, wants us to feel like the gods we were in D1. He calls this the Go Fast update. And he has this to say in reference to their goals with what changes they're making. Our goals for this round are to provide individual players with more hero moments by increasing overall speed and mobility, increasing the amount of supers you can charge to demolish your enemies, and increasing the frequency and impact of our most montage-worthy weapons, especially in the Crucible. Sounds pretty good, so let's take a look at some specifics that were outlined in that update. All three glides plus catapult and strafe lift have been retuned and buffed to make them more unique and faster. Sounds pretty cool. The mobility stat has had its range expanded and been completely retuned as well. In short, everyone gets faster and the high end is even higher. This should make mobility a little bit more attractive. The player's ground speed cap has been increased, thank the Lord, allowing for faster total movement speed regardless of how you may get there. Arcstrider, Sentinel, and Striker all move faster, and they are the same speed as one another while in their supers. It could definitely get a little frustrating having to chase your enemies around the map while you're in your super, so that should make it feel a lot better. Arcstrider as a whole is performing well in PvP, but mostly due to its neutral game perks. We've made the following changes in an effort to get the super to be a more competitive option. Faster attack animations, faster dodge animations, and increased range of all attacks. I love it. Supers recharge faster for everyone. I'm very curious to see how much faster it is. If it's just as fast as it was in Destiny 1, let's hope. We've buffed several weapon archetypes, including but not limited to hand cannons, pulse rifles, sniper rifles, and shotguns, and a few specific perks as well. A key goal here is to make shotguns, snipers, and fusion rifles more prevalent in the game. So it all sounds pretty great, but of course the weapon buffs are the only thing I'm still a little worried about. It just ultimately sucks to have to pick between a shotgun or a rocket launcher. A lot of people are clamoring for the old weapon system to return. I personally think there's a more creative solution out there for them to find that still includes elemental primaries, maybe in tandem to a revamp to the mod system that could help you assign elements to kinetic primaries, something along those lines. Lots of different ideas out there. What do you think of the weapon system? Do you think buffing these specials will be enough? But anyways, that wraps up the March update. Finally, we get to May, with update 1.2, the start of Season 3, and finally the injection of new content with the release of Gods of Mars, the second expansion to Destiny 2. So right off the bat, this is a pretty intense delay to Season 3. As we'll see here, this brings up a lot of questions about the timing of certain other things also in the pipeline, starting with Eater of Worlds Prestige. The fact that we have to wait 6 months after the release of the Eater of Worlds raid layer to get its hard mode is kinda insane. It really begs the question of why it's delayed, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it has to do with an entire rework of the concept to Prestige difficulty. The concept of Prestige is pretty dead on arrival at the moment. It was intended to replace the hard mode to present itself as the ultimate in challenge, but you end up getting a meaningless cosmetic trophy for a few days. It does not provide any additional power to you. Oh, and it was always intended to be locked behind the latest DLC, as it was designed to always scale with the increase in power cap. They're making adjustments to the whole system, but I think they know that's not enough, so I'm hoping that they're taking the concept of Prestige back to the drawing board, and we'll see the first fruits of that labor hopefully in the Prestige Eater of Worlds. The other possibility is that the Prestige mode just sucks, and they want to cook it for a little longer to make sure players don't have a negative reaction, because they really can't afford much more negative press at this point. Now, the real head-scratcher is that it seems to be right up against the release of Gods of Mars, and it might actually kind of coincide with the release of the second raid layer, so I'm very curious to see how the timing of those raid launches will play out, and how long do we have to wait until the release of the Prestige mode for Raid Layer 2? We've been told that more info on Prestige Eater of Worlds is coming sooner than later, so hopefully we'll have more answers pretty soon. Moving right along, the launch of Season 3 also brings us Ranked Crucible, private matches, an increase to vault space, which is just a band-aid fix for now until they completely rework the whole vault in the fall. We have the launch of multi-emotes, where we gain the ability to equip emotes into each of the 4 directional slots. Exotic Masterworks, which is much needed as Masterworks currently disincentivize the use of exotics, and hopefully this will be paired up with some new, more interesting Masterwork perks. Seasonal Vendor Progression, which grants you access to unique rewards at the end of the season. Faction Rally improvements, which will hopefully make the event a bit more exciting. And finally, we have mod system improvements as a stretch goal, which from the brief description that Josh Hamrick gave us, it looks like will be little more than just simple buffs to the percentages from each of the mods. Sadly, we may have to wait a little bit longer for a complete rework to the mod system, which I think is desperately needed. And that's May. My last concern is how close it is to the fall. We assume we're getting a major expansion around September, like how we got the Taken King a couple years ago, but now I'm not so sure. I'm also beginning to wonder if we're even going to get a Season 4 at all. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but right now it seems like we're going to have to take it one step at a time. Let's get an awesome Gods of Mars expansion, and then we can talk about what comes next. In summary, most of these updates sound pretty awesome. They are prioritizing the right things, it seems, and remember that none of this is addressing the actual content of the second expansion. I expect we'll see a series of live streams showing off the new activities, the new gear, etc, and hopefully they won't get cancelled this time. The DLC really needs to bring a lot of new gear, quests, a good campaign, and I think a new type of PvE activity like Court of Orcs or Prison of Elders, which we were hinted at getting anyways, so I'm looking forward to that. That combined with these changes could be pretty epic. Anyways, what do you think of the development roadmap? Do you think this is starting to build a solid foundation for new content? Let's discuss. Anyways, drop a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more Destiny content. And I will see you all next time.